My stepson announced during the wedding rehearsal. He's not one of us. I removed my name as the guarantor, revoked payment for the venue, and the guests never got their meals. Instead of fireworks, they got a little spark from unpaid invoices. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. I married Michelle 8 years ago. I was 45. She was 38. Not young, not old. Just at that brittle age where you tell yourself it's your last chance at happiness. She came into my life with 2 kids and a house filled with ghosts. Their names were Austin and Haley, and their father's name, whispered more than spoken, was Brad. Brad, the man of gestures. The kind who didn't need to stay because he had mastered the art of showing up just long enough to be missed. He arrived like a carnival and left before the cleanup. He'd roll up with a new gadget, a pair of sneakers no normal family could afford, and promises that sounded like fairy tales and smelled like gasoline. He'd take them for ice cream, talk about being there this time, and vanish before the sprinkles melted. Me? I was the man who stayed, the one who paid for the freezer. From the beginning, I knew where I stood. I wasn't there to replace Brad. I never wanted to be their father. I just wanted to give them something he never could: consistency. I showed up, not with gifts but with groceries. I wasn't the weekend hero. I was the Tuesday carpool, the Thursday night tutor, the Saturday leaky faucet guy, the unremarkable man who filled in the blanks. Michelle had that soft look in her eyes in those first years, the kind that said thank you without saying anything at all. She used to reach across the dinner table and squeeze my hand when the kids bickered, like we were partners in the trenches. I thought that meant something. I told myself I didn't need to hear the word Dad. They didn't owe me that. All I wanted was a seat at the table, a part in the story. I wanted to be the man who helped raise them into something better than what their father left behind. For a while, it worked. When Haley got the flu and started vomiting through the night, it was me who stayed up with her. Michelle had work at 6 a.m. So I took the floor beside Haley's bed, a damp cloth in my hand, changing buckets and whispering comfort. She was 9 then, too old to be cradled, too young to suffer alone. She never thanked me. She didn't have to. I wasn't looking for gratitude, just a place. Austin, on the other hand, fought me every inch of the way. He was 13 when I moved in, already building his wall. Every "you're not my dad" was implied in his silence. He didn't yell it. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes every time I offered help said it clearly enough: you're temporary. You don't belong here. But he came around. Or at least I thought he did. When he failed his algebra midterms, I stayed up with him 3 nights straight. I printed worksheets, watched YouTube tutorials, explained the same damn formula 100 times until he finally got it. When he passed the final, he didn't thank me. He high-fived Michelle. But still, I felt proud. I was part of it. I had helped. Michelle saw it. At least I believed she did. There were months when the bills stacked too high. Braces, soccer cleats, that emergency vet visit when Haley's hamster chewed through a wire. I worked overtime, nights, weekends. I canceled vacations, skipped birthdays, sold tools I swore I'd never part with. All to make sure the kids never felt that familiar ache of "we can't afford it." I never complained. Not once. I didn't want applause. I wanted unity, family. They never gave me a Father's Day card. Not even a mug. But Michelle would whisper, "We couldn't do this without you." And I'd pretend that was enough. Year by year, I filled in the space that Brad left hollow. He'd show up twice a year, sometimes 3. Always with fanfare. A new iPhone, pair of Jordans, tickets to a concert. And every time, the kids would light up like he was Santa Claus. They'd hug him like they hadn't been fed in months. And every time, he'd disappear again. And every time, I'd pick up the pieces. I paid for Haley's art classes, even when she quit halfway through. I bought Austin his first car. A used Civic, barely holding together, but it was something. I stayed up late helping with college applications. I called the admissions office myself when his SAT score didn't match the application. I filled in the FAFSA form. I wrote the check. He got into state college. I felt like I had climbed the mountain with him. When Austin proposed to his girlfriend last year, we toasted with champagne. I took the photo. Michelle cried. Haley clapped. Austin smiled. And in that moment, I let myself believe I had finally earned something close to belonging. So when he asked me to help with the wedding, I didn't hesitate. I handed over a check for the venue deposit. I agreed to cover half the catering. I offered to help with logistics, even transportation for his friends flying in from out of state. I did it without being asked, without being thanked, because that's what I did. I showed up. I made sure things got done. Michelle said again, "We couldn't do this without you." I smiled, but a small voice inside me whispered, "Then why do I still feel like I don't live here?" I never said it out loud. Couldn't. Because voicing it would have meant admitting I was still on the outside looking in, even after all these years. Even after every dollar, every hour, every quiet sacrifice. And then there was Haley. She never hated me. She just kept me at arm's length, like I was a guest who stayed too long. She'd thank Michelle for the dinners I cooked. She'd walk right past me after school and hug her mother. She'd laugh at Brad's jokes when he FaceTimed from whatever beach or bar he was visiting that month. And she'd roll her eyes when I reminded her to finish her homework or clean her dishes. Still, I went to every parent-teacher conference. I bought her prom dress when Michelle's card bounced. I paid for her therapy after that messy breakup with the older boy who left her crying in the bathroom. I didn't say, "I told you so." I just wrote the check. Michelle hugged me that night, said she was grateful, said I was holding the family together. But words are wind. And Michelle, sweet, tired, well-meaning Michelle, never once told her children to treat me with respect. She never corrected them when they called Brad Dad in front of me. She never asked them to say thank you. She never stood up for me when they ignored me at dinner or shot each other smirks when I tried to tell a joke. She never told them I mattered. And so I began to shrink. Not physically, just presence. I became the background noise, the provider, the driver, the man who made things possible but was never part of the picture. Still, I told myself it was okay, that maybe they just needed more time, that one day they'd look back and see who had really been there, that when the dust settled, I would be the one they turned to. When Austin handed me the wedding budget spreadsheet, it felt like progress. A sign that maybe, finally, I was being trusted, included. I opened my laptop. I opened my wallet. I opened my heart. Because that's what I always did. Brad returned the way mildew creeps into the corners of a house. Slow, silent, and impossible to ignore once it spreads. One day, Austin was texting me about tablecloth colors. The next, he was tagging Brad in group chats labeled family wedding planning. No warning, no explanation, just the name, his father's name, appearing again like it had never left. Brad had missed graduations, birthdays, and years of quiet need. He hadn't paid a cent toward Austin's education. He hadn't shown up when Haley was hospitalized for pneumonia. But now, with a wedding on the horizon, he emerged like a magician pulling himself out of a hat. Clean, charming, camera-ready. He took Austin out to lunch. Steak, probably. Expensive wine. The kind of meal where men say things they don't mean and call it bonding. At first, I told myself it was fine. Let the boy have his father. Let him play catch-up. Maybe they needed to speak, to forgive, to pretend they still had time. I could allow that. I could be the bigger man. But I wasn't blind. The calls increased. The texts turned daily. I'd pass Austin's room and hear laughter. Not the casual kind, but that feverish laughter reserved for people who are trying to make up for lost years. Michelle said nothing. Just chewed her lip and stared at the carpet every time I brought it up. "He's just trying to reconnect," she offered one night. "After all this time?" I asked. She looked at me with those tired eyes. "It's his father." And I understood then, no matter what Brad had done, no matter how I had carried these kids, there was something in Michelle that still honored his title more than my presence. Things shifted after that. Quietly, like furniture being rearranged just enough to trip you in the dark. Austin stopped mentioning the wedding planning in front of me. When I asked about deadlines or budget adjustments, he'd nod vaguely or tell me he had it under control. He stopped asking for my opinion on the guest list. He stopped sharing the email threads. Michelle noticed, but she said nothing. Her silence wrapped around me like a noose. Every time Brad's name came up, usually from Haley, who now gushed about how he'd promised to take them all to dinner after the rehearsal, Michelle would smile and change the subject. At first, I told myself it was just temporary. A phase. A flare-up of old wounds. Brad was a novelty again. He'd fade the way he always did. The kids would come back to me, to the one who had always stayed. But something deeper was unraveling. Something permanent. The rehearsal dinner was weeks away. The suit I paid for hung in the closet. I had signed every check, returned every vendor call, confirmed every floral arrangement. Yet my name wasn't spoken. Not even once. Then came the meeting. A family meeting, they called it. Michelle, Austin, Haley, and me gathered around the dining table like some warped version of unity. Austin brought out his laptop, opened a spreadsheet. He was confident, rehearsed. Haley chimed in with details. Michelle offered coffee like it was any other night. And then it happened. We were discussing the remaining costs. A few thousand here for the DJ, a few hundred more for gift bags, and I made a simple comment. We'll have to make sure everything's squared away by the end of next week. The venue wants final confirmation. Austin didn't look up. He just kept typing. Then, like it was nothing, he said, I think that's something my real parents should handle. The room didn't go quiet. It died. Michelle froze, her hands trembling just slightly around the coffee pot. Haley looked down at her phone like it had suddenly become urgent. No one looked at me. I nodded. Just once. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I didn't show my throat. But inside, something snapped. Not like a twig. Not quick. Like a tree centuries old. Finally giving in to the slow rot at its base. My real parents. All those nights I stayed up doing his homework. The job I worked late so he could afford a prom limo. The guitar lessons I paid for. The graduation suit I tailored by hand. The deposit for the wedding he was now planning with someone else's name at the top of the invite list. I wasn't real to him. Michelle didn't defend me. She didn't look at me. She stared into her coffee like it held the script to a better response. And in that silence, I realized the truth. She had always left the door cracked open for Brad. She had never truly closed it. And now their son was walking through it, dragging my name behind him like trash to be collected later. I excused myself, calmly, politely, like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. I stood in the hallway for a long time after that, pretending to read a framed picture of the kids from 5 years ago. In it, they were smiling. I remembered that day. We had gone to the zoo. I paid for everything, packed the sandwiches, drove the car. Brad wasn't there. But looking at the picture now, I couldn't find myself in it. I was behind the lens. Always behind. That night, in our bedroom, Michelle pretended nothing had happened. She asked me about work. I answered. She said good night. I didn't reply. In the dark, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling fan. It turned slowly, like the thoughts in my head. Not spinning fast enough to cool me, just enough to remind me I was alive. I thought about all the birthdays I had planned, the meals I had cooked, the mortgage I had covered so we could keep the roof. The time Haley locked herself in the bathroom and cried for hours and I sat outside the door until she opened it. I thought about the first time Austin called me David instead of hey, and then I thought about how easily he erased me. My real parents. The phrase looped, carved into me with a dull knife. The next morning, Austin and Haley were gone before I woke up. Michelle made eggs. I didn't eat them. She tried to ask about the wedding budget, but I just nodded. I think she thought things would pass. She didn't understand that something had changed. Something final. I was no longer confused. No longer waiting for them to see me. I saw myself clearly, painfully. A man who had spent 8 years building a home he was never invited to live in. I went into the garage, pulled down a box of old receipts. Tuition, sports fees, summer camp deposits, concert tickets, orthodontist bills, backpacks, shoes, laptops, birthday cakes. I calculated line by line what I had spent on children who now referred to me in the third person. Over $78,000. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for clarity, to stop gaslighting myself into believing I had been accepted. I had been convenient, that's all. Michelle didn't come into the garage that day. She didn't ask what I was doing. She probably knew. Or maybe she didn't want to know. Easier that way. Later that night, Austin posted a photo online. Him and Brad, sitting at some brewery, clinking glasses. The caption read, "Real ones only." It got over 100 likes. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't comment. I went to my desk, opened my notebook, wrote down a single sentence in the corner of a blank page. Don't mistake silence for consent. That was the night I made my silent decision. No arguments, no grand speeches, no slammed doors. Just the quiet resolve of a man finally recognizing that you don't keep building a house where you're never handed a key. They'd made it clear who belonged. So I stepped back and watched. And that silence was the loudest thing I'd said in 8 years. The rehearsal was supposed to be a formality. A simple run-through before the big show. Walk down the aisle. Practice the timing. Shake hands. Smile for pictures. Pretend. I dressed the part. Gray suit. Pressed collar. Tie Haley picked out. Something blue to match the linens. I drove Michelle and Haley to the hall. Carried the box of centerpieces. Smiled through tight teeth. The venue was a converted barn, polished floors and string lights, the kind of place you rent to convince people that old wounds can look like nostalgia if you throw enough money at them. Brad was already there. Of course he was. Leaning against the bar, drink in hand, wearing a blazer that cost more than my car's last repair. Laughing with the groomsmen like he'd been part of this family all along. Like we hadn't spent the last decade cleaning up his absences. Michelle went straight to him, kissed his cheek, like it was nothing. I stood still, hands in pockets, throat dry. I looked for Austin, found him across the room, in a circle of faces I didn't recognize. Friends from college, people who knew him only as Brad's son. I started to walk over. Thought maybe we'd go over the itinerary, maybe share a moment. But before I could reach him, he turned, pointed at Brad, and said something that made the whole group laugh. I stopped walking. Something told me it wasn't a story about me. They called everyone together a few minutes later. Time to rehearse. Michelle took her place next to Brad. Not me. That small detail said more than any speech could. The officiant cleared his throat and began reading from the script. Bridesmaids, groomsmen, parents, walk here, pause there, smile, turn. When it was my turn to walk, I hesitated. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. I walked slowly, deliberately. My footsteps didn't echo. No one clapped. Michelle gave me a polite nod. Haley looked away. Then Austin stepped forward. The officiant gestured toward the spot marked for father of the groom. Brad took it. And before anyone could speak, before the awkwardness could be swept under a rug, Austin raised his voice just enough to catch the room's attention. He smiled. "He's not part of our family," he said. "He just helped pay for things." Laughter. One beat, then silence. Thick, unnatural silence. Like the air had been punched out of the building. The officiant stammered. Someone coughed. A chair scraped back. I stood there, surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. The humiliation was surgical, precise. Not an outburst, a statement, a clarification. Michelle said nothing. Brad looked at the floor. Haley folded her arms. I didn't move. I felt heat rise to my ears. My palms went cold. My legs itched to walk, run, scream, but I stayed still. That moment stretched like taffy, long and tasteless, and I realized the rehearsal wasn't for the wedding. It was for my erasure. I turned without a word, walked out of the barn into the dusk. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, each step louder than the last. I didn't hear anyone follow me. I didn't expect them to. Back at home, I poured myself a drink, sat down in my office, locked the door, opened the bank. Every automatic payment, venue deposit, caterer, DJ, flowers, photographer, all linked to my account. All pending final charges. All under my name. I started at the top. Removed my card. Cancelled authorizations. One by one, I dismantled the wedding I helped build. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I was no longer invited. Why should I fund the show? Next, I opened the wedding folder. Emails, invoices, receipts. I drafted a simple message to each vendor. Due to unforeseen family circumstances, I will no longer be financially responsible for the wedding of Austin Blake. Please contact the family directly for further arrangements. I hit send, over and over, until the folder was empty. Then I opened a new document, titled it, Debt You Don't See. In it, I listed every major contribution I'd made since moving into this family. Tuition, down payments, emergency surgeries, vacation homes, wedding costs, gas money, groceries, late-night takeout when no one said thank you, totaled over 6 figures. I wrote one final line at the bottom. He's not part of our family. He just helped pay for things. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. I don't know how long I stayed there. Time had stopped meaning anything. Around midnight, I heard the front door open. Michelle's voice low, brittle. The creak of Haley's bedroom door. Then Austin's voice, loud, furious. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. Disbelief. Confusion. Like he couldn't fathom that consequences might follow his performance. They didn't knock on my door. They didn't need to. I had left them exactly what they deserved. Silence. The next morning, texts flooded my phone. Missed calls. Michelle. Haley. Even Brad, who somehow found the nerve to talk man-to-man. I blocked him first. Michelle sent a long message about emotions running high and how Austin didn't mean it like that. She asked if we could talk. I didn't respond, because what would I say? That her son spit on the man who gave him a future? That her silence proved complicity? That I had stood for them, paid for them, defended them, and been discarded like a service that had outlived its usefulness? No, I had said enough. By evening, the cancellations began to take effect. The florist messaged Michelle directly. The DJ emailed Austin, asking for a new payment method. The venue called, told her the card on file had been declined, that the date would be released if payment wasn't received within 48 hours. Michelle came into my office that night. Didn't knock. She just stood there, eyes red, voice soft. You really did it, she whispered. I looked at her. Yes. Her lip trembled. You've ruined everything. No, I said. Austin did that. I just stopped funding the illusion. She stepped forward, as if to plead, but I raised a hand. Don't try to fix this. You stood there. You let him say it. You let Brad take my place. He's their father, she said, as if it was an excuse. As if DNA excused decades of abandonment. And I was their foundation, I replied. But you let them bulldoze me the moment the showman returned. Tears fell. She didn't wipe them. David, she said, we need you. No, I corrected. You needed my money, and now it's gone. She left, quietly. No more words. The next 2 days were chaos. Haley slammed doors. Michelle made frantic calls. Austin texted again and again, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. But I didn't reply. Let them solve it. Let Brad fund the dream. Let Michelle find out what happens when you build your life on someone you refuse to stand beside when it counts. That night, I sat on the back porch, looked out over the yard I mowed, the lights I installed, the deck I built with my own hands, plank by plank. The space where we had once grilled burgers, laughed under stars, told stories I thought were binding. It was all scaffolding. Hollow. The rehearsal had just confirmed what I'd always feared. I wasn't the father. I was the financier. I raised their children, but they were never mine. The wedding day arrived under a sky too bright for grief. Not a cloud in sight, just sun, merciless, indifferent, pouring over the mess they'd made. Michelle left early. She didn't say goodbye. I heard her heels click across the hardwood, then fade down the steps like an echo walking away. I stayed in bed, didn't dress, didn't move, just stared at the ceiling and thought about everything I had given, and everything they'd taken, and how little of it mattered now. The silence in the house was clean. No texts, no calls. Not from Haley. Not from Michelle. And certainly not from Austin. I imagined them at the venue. Chairs half-filled, guests milling around awkwardly, whispers circling like flies. The DJ pacing near the speakers, waiting for confirmation. The florist still expecting a delivery address. The caterers staring at the unpaid invoice and wondering if it was a scam. By noon, the first photos surfaced online. Someone posted a wide shot of the empty reception hall. A caption beneath it read, "Delayed due to payment issues. Awkward. No flowers. No music. No food. Just blank tables, cheap folding chairs, and a bride with her makeup cracking under stress." I almost pitied her. Almost. By sunset, more followed. Shots of guests leaving early. A groomsman smoking outside. Alone. Haley looking furious. Phone in hand. Probably texting Brad. Or Michelle. Or both. But Brad wasn't there anymore. Of course he wasn't. He'd done what he always did, swoop in, soak up the attention, play the part of father long enough to get his name on the program. Then vanish the moment a bill landed. I knew the timeline. I'd seen it before. Show up, pose for pictures, shake hands, whisper promises, and then gone. Michelle tried to call me around 7. I let it ring, then ring again, then stop. An hour later, she sent a message. He left. Brad. I don't know where he went. Austin is. I don't know what to do. No apology. No accountability. Just panic. I didn't respond. Let her sit in it. Let her feel the quiet she'd made room for by letting someone else's name fill the space where mine used to live. The next morning, the voicemail arrived. Austin's voice. Cracked. Slow. Nothing like the boy who once laughed at my jokes while I changed the oil in his car. Nothing like the man who told a room full of strangers I wasn't family. "David," he said. "I know I don't have the right to ask you anything. I get it. I was wrong. I see it now. Everything's falling apart. I just wanted you to know that. Brad's gone. Again. Mom doesn't know what to say. And I don't either. I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I should've. You did everything." And I said the one thing that made it all mean nothing. There was a pause. Then, if I could take it back, I would. Then silence. Then, "I'm sorry." Click. I deleted the message. Not out of spite. Not even anger. Just finality. You can't uncross a line like that. Once you choose showmanship over substance, names over presence, it's done. Some bridges don't burn. They disintegrate the moment you step off them. A week passed. I didn't hear from any of them. Then, on a Thursday morning, I opened the front door to a small package on the stoop. No return address. Inside was a single photo, me and Austin 6 years ago, standing in front of the high school. He had just passed his driving test. I had my arm around his shoulder. We were smiling. Genuinely. Before things got complicated. Before Brad's shadow darkened the room again. Taped to the back was a note. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." No signature. Just that. I held the photo in my hand for a long time. The kind of long where silence has weight. I looked at the boy I used to believe in. The man he had become. And the version of myself that still thought love, hard work, and patience would someday be enough. Then I opened the drawer in my desk and slid the photo inside. Not out of cruelty. Not out of bitterness. Out of closure. Because I didn't need a frame for it. Didn't need a monument to remind me what I already knew. I gave everything I had to a family that never chose me. I held up the roof. I paid the bills. I showed up when the man they called Dad didn't. I was the spine of a body that turned its head to someone else the moment the cameras started rolling. And now I was free. They could rebuild their little house of names and nostalgia with someone else's money. Someone else's time. Or no one's at all. Let them scrape together the pieces of their broken ceremony and pretend it was wind that blew it down. Not the rot beneath their feet. I didn't wish them harm. But I no longer wished them well. That part of me, the one that believed family could be earned by effort alone, was gone. And in its place was something colder. Something sharper. Clarity. I had spent nearly a decade trying to win the unwinnable, to earn my way into a circle that drew its lines in blood, not deeds. I had believed that love would eventually turn into loyalty, that persistence would soften resentment, that showing up would be enough. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. You can't fix people who enjoy breaking you. You can't heal in a house where your name is never spoken unless there's a check to sign. You can't keep giving to people who treat your sacrifices like furniture, useful, silent, and replaceable. And most of all, you can't be a father where you're only ever seen as a wallet with shoes. Michelle tried to come back. A few weeks after the failed wedding, she stood on my porch with tired eyes and hands that trembled when she spoke. "We made mistakes," she said. "I let things happen I should have stopped. I thought you'd always be there." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman who had once held my hand at the dinner table. The woman who had watched her children laugh at me and chose not to speak. The woman who let her silence answer questions I never dared to ask. "You thought wrong," I said. She started to cry. I didn't comfort her. She left. She didn't return. And I didn't chase her. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your worth is to remove it from people who won't recognize it. The house grew quieter. Days passed without their names in my mouth. Without the sound of ungrateful children slamming doors I paid for. Without the ache of waiting for something that never comes. I began to breathe again. Not with joy, but with peace. Not a reward, but a relief. And maybe that's all some of us get in the end. Not family. Not legacy. Just the calm that comes when the noise finally stops. And so now I ask you, whoever finds this story, whoever still believes that love and labor can force open a locked door, was I wrong? Was I cruel to walk away? Or was this the only way left to remind them and myself that respect is not optional, and that love without it is just another name for servitude? Tell me, would you have stayed?